Respect is not forced. It is felt. Many people attempt to command respect through dominance, volume, or control. They interrupt quickly. They assert opinions aggressively. They equate intensity with authority. Yet these behaviors often generate compliance at best, resistance at worst. True respect begins elsewhere. It begins inside. Your inner command center is the internal space where emotion is processed before it becomes behavior. It is the seat of regulation. If that center is unstable, your presence will be unstable. If it is grounded, your presence will feel grounded to others. Emotional intelligence starts with awareness of your emotional baseline. Emotional baseline is your stable internal state before entering interaction. It is the calm, centered condition from which you think clearly and respond deliberately. Without awareness of this baseline, you operate reactively, carried by mood and circumstance. Most people do not notice when their baseline shifts. They walk into meetings already irritated from traffic. They join conversations carrying stress from earlier conflicts. They respond to small comments with disproportionate intensity because their internal state was unsettled long before the trigger appeared. Consider a senior manager preparing to lead a critical meeting. Earlier in the day, she received an unexpected email questioning her recent decision. The message lingers in her mind. As the meeting begins, a team member challenges her proposal with a neutral question. Because her baseline is already elevated, she hears threat where none exists. Her tone sharpens. She responds defensively. The room tightens. Authority weakens, not because her idea lacked strength, but because her internal state was unmanaged. Now imagine the same scenario with awareness. Before entering the meeting, she pauses briefly and checks her emotional condition. She notices residual irritation from the earlier email. Instead of ignoring it, she acknowledges it silently and takes several slow breaths. She reminds herself of the objective of the meeting. By stabilizing her baseline, she prevents unrelated emotion from contaminating the interaction. When the question comes, she responds evenly. The room remains open. Respect holds. This is the power of self-regulation. Influence flows from predictability. When people sense that you are easily provoked or emotionally volatile, they adjust cautiously around you. When they sense steadiness, they relax. Calm authority creates psychological safety. Your inner command center functions like a filter. Stimulus enters. Interpretation occurs. Emotion rises. Response follows. Without awareness, these steps collapse into one reflexive reaction. With awareness, space opens between them. That space is control. Developing this control requires consistent internal observation. Notice shifts in mood throughout the day. Identify moments when your tone changes slightly. Pay attention to physical cues such as tightened shoulders, faster speech, or shallow breathing. These signals indicate movement away from baseline. Self-awareness is not self-criticism. It is data collection. When you observe yourself objectively, you gain leverage over your reactions. A simple practice strengthens this foundation. Before entering any important interaction, pause for 1 minute. Close your eyes if possible. Identify your current emotional state in one word. Calm, irritated, tired, focused. Then ask whether that state will serve the interaction ahead. If not, adjust your breathing deliberately, slow your internal dialogue, and reset your posture. This short ritual trains you to enter rooms intentionally rather than reactively. Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing feeling. It is about directing it. Anger may arise. Frustration may appear. Excitement may surge. Your task is not to eliminate these experiences, but to prevent them from dictating your behavior. When your inner command center is strong, you become less predictable in reaction and more predictable in composure. People begin to trust your steadiness. They test you less. They listen more. Respect is rarely demanded successfully. It is earned through emotional control visible over time. Your presence speaks before you do. If your internal state is chaotic, others will sense it immediately. If it is composed, they will feel that as well. Authority begins with self-governance. When you manage your own emotions consistently, you create the conditions for influence. Stabilize your baseline. Strengthen your awareness. Build your inner command center. From that foundation, every other skill of emotional intelligence becomes possible. Your presence enters the room before your words do. Energy is felt immediately. Some people walk in scattered, rushed, slightly agitated. Others walk in steady, measured, composed. The difference is not personality. It is control over their emotional baseline. Emotional baseline is your stable internal state before entering interaction. When that baseline fluctuates with every inconvenience, your influence weakens. When it remains consistent across environments, respect grows naturally. Most individuals allow external events to dictate internal condition. A delayed email changes their mood. A critical comment disrupts their confidence. A minor inconvenience alters their tone. By the time they step into a conversation, they are already reacting to something that is no longer present. Emotional baseline control is the discipline of stabilizing yourself before engagement. Imagine a consultant preparing to meet a high-value client. On the way to the office, traffic stalls unexpectedly. Frustration builds. She arrives slightly late and walks into the meeting carrying irritation. Her speech is sharper than usual. Her listening is reduced. Small comments from the client feel like criticism. The meeting ends without clear alignment. Now picture the same scenario with baseline control. She notices frustration rising in traffic. Instead of replaying complaints internally, she shifts focus to breathing slowly and planning the key objectives of the meeting. Before entering the building, she pauses in the lobby for 30 seconds, stands upright, and resets her posture. By the time she greets the client, her tone is steady. The earlier irritation does not transfer into the room. The interaction feels calm and professional. This difference appears subtle. Its impact is not. When your baseline is unstable, your perception becomes distorted. Neutral expressions appear negative. Questions feel confrontational. Silence feels uncomfortable. Emotional fluctuation creates interpretation errors. Consistency, on the other hand, sharpens clarity. You respond to what is actually happening, not to residual emotion from previous events. Baseline control also strengthens authority in leadership. Teams observe mood patterns. If your energy shifts unpredictably, people adjust defensively. They become cautious around you. If your demeanor remains steady under varying circumstances, they relax into your leadership. Stability does not mean emotional flatness. It means regulated intensity. You may express enthusiasm. You may express concern. But these expressions are measured, not reactive. Physical regulation supports baseline control. Breathing is foundational. Slow, controlled breathing signals safety to the nervous system. Posture reinforces internal stability. An upright stance with relaxed shoulders reduces agitation and improves vocal steadiness. Language matters as well. Before entering an environment, replace reactive thoughts with intentional framing. Instead of thinking, "I hope this goes well," shift to, "I will remain composed and focused." This primes your internal state. Another effective practice is environmental transition. When moving from one context to another, create a brief mental reset. After finishing a difficult call, do not immediately enter the next meeting. Take 1 minute to clear residual emotion. This prevents emotional carryover. Consider a manager who adopts a simple ritual. Before every meeting, he stands still for 30 seconds, inhales slowly through the nose, exhales deliberately, and reviews the objective of the conversation. Over months, his team begins to describe him as calm under pressure. He did not change his personality. He strengthened his baseline. Emotional baseline control reduces unnecessary conflict. It improves listening. It stabilizes tone. It enhances decision-making. Without control of baseline, emotional intelligence remains theoretical. With it, influence becomes practical. Practice noticing your state at transition points, before calls, before presentations, before difficult conversations. Label it clearly. Adjust it intentionally. Enter interactions by choice, not by momentum. Respect accumulates around those who remain steady when circumstances fluctuate. Stability is power. Build it deliberately. You are not triggered by what happens. You are triggered by what it means to you. Two people can hear the same comment and react in completely different ways. One remains calm. The other feels immediate irritation. The difference lies in the trigger pattern. A trigger pattern is a recurring stimulus that provokes a disproportionate emotional reaction. It is not the event itself, but the internal association attached to it. Until you identify your patterns, they control you. Triggers are often rooted in identity. Being interrupted may feel like disrespect. Being questioned may feel like doubt in your competence. Being ignored may feel like rejection. These interpretations happen instantly and automatically. Without awareness, a trigger compresses the response gap. The response gap is the pause between stimulus and action where choice exists. When a trigger is activated, that pause shrinks. Reaction becomes reflex. Imagine a team leader presenting a new initiative. Midway through her explanation, a colleague interjects with a correction. The interruption activates a familiar trigger pattern connected to past experiences of being overlooked. Her body tightens. She responds sharply, cutting him off in return. The tone shifts. The room senses tension. Authority weakens. Now consider the same moment with trigger awareness. She feels the surge of irritation but recognizes it as a pattern. She identifies the internal narrative, "I'm being undermined." Instead of reacting immediately, she slows her breathing slightly and allows the colleague to finish. She then responds calmly, clarifying the point and continuing her presentation. The interruption no longer dictates the outcome. The event did not change. Her awareness did. Trigger mapping is the process of identifying recurring emotional reactions and tracing them to their underlying beliefs. When you map your triggers, you reclaim control. Common triggers include criticism, exclusion, delays, perceived disrespect, and loss of control. Each carries a personal story. The key is to separate fact from narrative. Fact: someone disagreed with you. Narrative: they are attacking your competence. Fact: a colleague did not respond immediately. Narrative: you are being ignored intentionally. Trigger patterns distort perception by adding interpretation automatically. Over time, repeated reactions reinforce the pattern. Mapping begins with reflection. Think of recent situations where your emotional response felt stronger than the circumstance warranted. Identify the stimulus clearly. Then ask what meaning you assign to it. What assumption formed instantly? Consider a professional who notices consistent irritation when receiving feedback from a specific peer. Upon reflection, he realizes the irritation connects to an earlier competitive dynamic between them. The present feedback is neutral, but the past association intensifies reaction. Once recognized, the emotional charge decreases. Physical awareness is crucial. Triggers often register in the body before conscious thought. Tight chest, clenched jaw, accelerated speech. These signals are early indicators that a pattern is activating. Develop a simple exercise. At the end of each day, identify one moment where your emotional reaction was elevated. Write down 3 elements: the event, the immediate interpretation, and the visible response. Then ask whether the interpretation was the only possible explanation. Over time, recurring themes will appear. These themes are your trigger patterns. Mapping does not eliminate triggers instantly. It weakens them by bringing them into awareness. Once you can name a pattern, you are less likely to be controlled by it. Emotion itself is not the problem. Unexamined emotion is. Commanding respect requires predictable composure. If others can easily provoke you, your influence shrinks. When you respond with measured steadiness despite provocation, authority grows. Triggers are invitations to strengthen self-control. Each time you notice one and choose a deliberate response instead of a reflexive reaction, you expand your response gap. Power in any room begins with mastery over your internal reactions. Know your patterns. Name them clearly. Slow the impulse. When triggers lose their grip, your presence becomes steadier, stronger, and far more difficult to destabilize. Events are neutral. Interpretation gives them weight. Most emotional escalation does not begin with what someone says. It begins with what you decide their words mean. Without discipline, your perception filter distorts reality. A perception filter is the lens through which you interpret others' behavior. It is shaped by past experiences, insecurities, expectations, and assumptions. When unexamined, it quietly reshapes facts into narratives. Perception discipline is the ability to separate observable reality from emotional interpretation. Consider a scenario in a leadership meeting. A senior executive listens quietly while you present an idea. He maintains a neutral expression and takes notes without commenting. After the meeting, you replay the moment repeatedly. You conclude he disliked your proposal. Doubt grows. In the next meeting, you over-explain, defend preemptively, and speak with tension. Yet the observable facts were simple. He listened, he took notes, he did not interrupt. Your interpretation created the emotional shift. When perception is undisciplined, you treat assumptions as facts. Neutral becomes negative. Delays become rejection. Disagreement becomes disrespect. This distortion weakens authority because your reactions respond to imagined threats rather than real ones. Perception discipline requires slowing down internal storytelling. When emotion rises, pause and ask, what are the verifiable facts? What did I actually observe? For example, if someone interrupts you, the fact is that they began speaking before you finished. The interpretation might be that they do not value your input. Those are not the same. By isolating facts, you widen the response gap. Clarity increases. Reaction decreases. Imagine a project manager receiving a brief email from her supervisor that reads, "We need to discuss your last report." No additional context. Her initial reaction is anxiety. She assumes criticism. Her mood shifts. She spends the next hour distracted. Instead of accepting that interpretation, she applies perception discipline. Fact: the supervisor requested a discussion. Interpretation: it is negative feedback. She recognizes the assumption and withholds judgment. When the meeting occurs, the supervisor actually praises the clarity of the report and asks for expansion on one section. Emotional stability was preserved by refusing premature narrative. This skill strengthens authority because it reduces visible overreaction. When others attempt to provoke you intentionally, perception discipline prevents manipulation. It also improves listening. If you assume hostile intent too quickly, you stop hearing nuance. If you suspend judgment, you gather more accurate information. A practical exercise reinforces this discipline. During emotionally charged conversations, mentally divide what you observe into two categories: facts and interpretations. Do this silently. After the interaction, write down both lists. Review how often your emotional reaction was driven by interpretation rather than fact. Over time, you will notice patterns in your perception filter. Perhaps you assume criticism quickly. Perhaps you interpret silence as rejection. Identifying these tendencies weakens their influence. Authority requires emotional steadiness grounded in reality. When you respond to facts rather than stories, your tone becomes measured. Your decisions become rational. Your presence becomes stable. Perception discipline does not mean ignoring intuition. It means verifying it before acting. Respect grows around individuals who are difficult to destabilize. When others realize that subtle cues or ambiguous comments do not provoke you easily, they adjust their behavior accordingly. Clarity protects composure. Separate what happened from what you believe it means. Act only on what you know, not on what you fear. When your perception is disciplined, your responses become deliberate. Deliberate responses command respect naturally. Between what happens and what you do, there is a small space. Most people collapse that space. A comment is made, and they respond instantly. A message arrives, and they react immediately. Tone sharpens, volume rises, posture shifts. The moment feels automatic. Yet inside that small space lies authority. The response gap is the pause between stimulus and action where choice exists. Emotional intelligence expands this gap. Intentional response is the discipline of using it deliberately. Impulsive reactions are easy. They feel honest. They feel strong. But they are often driven by ego, fear, or defensiveness rather than clarity. Intentional response replaces reflex with selection. Imagine a director presenting a proposal to her board. Midway through, a member says, "I'm not convinced this is realistic." The room becomes quiet. A reflexive response would be defensive. She might argue immediately, list credentials, or subtly attack the critic's perspective. Instead, she pauses. She allows a brief silence without tension. She inhales slowly and says, "Tell me what concerns you most." The tone remains calm. The pause signaled control. The question redirected the energy. The board member clarifies a specific risk assumption. She addresses it directly with data. The atmosphere shifts from confrontation to problem solving. The difference was not intelligence. It was the expanded response gap. Pausing does not mean hesitating weakly. It means choosing consciously. Intentional response has three components: awareness of emotion, interruption of reflex, and deliberate communication. When you feel the internal surge of irritation or urgency, recognize it. Do not deny it. Then interrupt the automatic reply by slowing your breathing or briefly redirecting attention. Finally, select words aligned with your objective rather than your emotion. Language plays a powerful role here. Replace defensive phrases like, "That's not what I meant," with grounded ones such as, "Let's clarify that." Replace reactive statements like, "You're wrong," with, "I see it differently." The shift preserves authority while maintaining composure. Tone and pacing matter as much as content. Speaking slightly slower than your impulse demands conveys control. Lowering your volume subtly during tension forces others to listen more carefully. Intentional response also includes knowing when not to respond immediately. Not every message requires instant reply. Not every criticism requires immediate defense. Sometimes the strongest move is delayed clarity. Consider a professional who receives a critical email late in the evening. Emotion rises. The impulse is to respond quickly and correct the record. Instead, she drafts a reply but does not send it. The next morning, with a clearer baseline, she revises the message into a concise, composed explanation. The outcome improves because the response gap was honored. This discipline prevents escalation. When one person reacts emotionally and the other remains measured, the dynamic stabilizes. Authority flows toward the calmer presence. Practice strengthening your response gap intentionally. In your next conversation, insert a 1-second pause before answering any challenging question. Allow the silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Notice how this changes both your clarity and the other person's perception. Another exercise is counting one full breath before responding when you feel emotionally triggered. Inhale slowly. Exhale completely. Then speak. This simple interruption prevents reflexive language. Intentional response does not suppress authenticity. It refines it. You still express disagreement. You still set boundaries. You simply do so with choice rather than impulse. People respect those who respond thoughtfully under pressure. They trust those whose words appear selected rather than spilled. The small space between stimulus and action is where composure lives. Expand it consistently. When you choose your responses instead of releasing them automatically, your presence shifts from reactive to authoritative. Authority is not loud. It is controlled. Pause. Breathe. Choose. That is how respect begins to solidify around you. Every room has two conversations happening at once. One is spoken. The other is felt. Words carry information, but tone, posture, pacing, and silence carry emotional data. Those who ignore this second layer miss half the interaction. Those who read it accurately gain quiet advantage. Social signal awareness is sensitivity to tone, posture, and group dynamics. It is the ability to detect subtle emotional shifts without becoming overwhelmed by them. This skill sharpens perception without sacrificing composure. Most people listen only to content. They respond to what is said while missing how it is said. Yet tension often appears in micro-expressions, brief pauses, crossed arms, or a slight change in vocal energy. Imagine a department meeting where a proposal is introduced. On the surface, everyone nods in agreement. No one objects directly. However, you notice two team members exchange a glance. One leans back slightly, arms folded. Another stops taking notes. The words in the room suggest alignment, but the undercurrent suggests hesitation. If you ignore these signals, resistance may surface later outside the room. If you acknowledge them calmly, you maintain control of the narrative. A leader skilled in reading emotional undercurrents might say, in a neutral tone, "I sense there may be concerns we haven't voiced yet. I'd like to hear them now." The invitation creates space. One of the previously silent members raises a practical issue. The discussion becomes productive rather than delayed conflict. This is awareness without paranoia. Social signal awareness requires observation free from projection. You are not guessing motives. You are noticing patterns. Tone often reveals more than language. A simple, "that's fine," delivered with flat energy may signal reluctance. A rapid agreement may indicate desire to move on quickly rather than genuine support. Group energy shifts are equally important. Rooms tighten during tension. Voices lower or rise collectively. Laughter may feel forced. Silence may stretch slightly longer than comfortable. These cues reveal emotional climate. The key is remaining steady while observing. If you absorb every emotional shift, you become reactive. If you observe calmly, you gain clarity. Consider a professional negotiating a partnership. The counterpart speaks confidently but avoids eye contact when discussing deadlines. His voice lowers slightly when referencing internal approval. Instead of confronting directly, the professional notes the inconsistency and asks a clarifying question. What internal steps need to happen before we finalize timelines? The question uncovers hesitation about executive approval. By reading subtle signals, she prevents future misunderstanding. This skill is sharpened through deliberate attention. In your next meeting, focus less on preparing your reply and more on observing the room. Notice posture changes when certain topics arise. Notice who speaks quickly and who hesitates. Notice energy shifts after specific comments. Do this without reacting immediately. Afterward, reflect on what you observed. Were your interpretations confirmed by later discussion? Over time, your accuracy improves. Reading undercurrents also protects against manipulation. When someone's words and tone conflict, pause. Seek clarification rather than assuming alignment. However, avoid overanalysis. The goal is pattern recognition, not suspicion. One signal alone may mean little. Repeated signals reveal more. Authority grows when you demonstrate awareness without accusation. Saying, "It seems this topic carries some tension," in a calm voice signals perceptiveness. It also signals safety, because you address emotion without escalating it. People feel respected when they sense that you perceive what is happening beneath the surface. Emotional intelligence is not only self-regulation. It is environmental awareness. When you can read emotional currents without being swept away by them, you move with quiet control. You begin to anticipate shifts before they become conflicts. You address hesitation before it becomes resistance. The room always communicates. Learn to listen beyond words. Calm observation strengthens influence. And influence, grounded in awareness, commands respect naturally. Understanding emotion is powerful. Absorbing it is dangerous. Many people confuse empathy with emotional immersion. They feel what others feel so intensely that they lose clarity. They mirror anxiety. They mirror anger. They mirror instability. Instead of stabilizing the room, they amplify it. Strategic empathy is understanding others' emotions without losing self-control. It is calibrated awareness combined with internal containment. Empathy without boundaries weakens authority. Strategic empathy strengthens it. When someone expresses frustration, your role is not to become frustrated with them. When someone is anxious, your role is not to match their anxiety. Your value lies in remaining grounded while acknowledging their experience. Imagine a team member approaching a manager in visible distress about a missed deadline. His speech is rushed. His tone is defensive. He anticipates criticism. A reactive manager might respond with matching intensity, escalating the emotional temperature. A manager operating with strategic empathy responds differently. She listens without interruption. She observes the tension in his voice and posture. She says calmly, "I can see this situation is weighing on you. Let's break down what happened." The acknowledgement validates emotion without validating panic. Her tone remains steady. The team member's breathing slows. The conversation shifts from emotion to solution. Strategic empathy communicates understanding while maintaining emotional containment. Emotional containment is regulating visible reaction under pressure. Together, they create stability. This balance requires internal discipline. When someone shares strong emotion, you may feel an impulse to fix immediately or to defend yourself. Pause instead. Listen fully. Reflect back key points neutrally. Avoid exaggerating their emotion or minimizing it. Language matters. Replace "calm down" with "let's take this step by step." Replace "you're overreacting" with "help me understand what feels most urgent here." These responses preserve dignity while guiding focus. Strategic empathy also protects against manipulation. Some individuals attempt to influence through emotional intensity. They may raise their voice or display visible frustration to gain leverage. If you absorb that energy, you lose control. If you remain steady while acknowledging their perspective, the tactic loses power. Consider a negotiation where the counterpart becomes visibly irritated, claiming unfair treatment. Instead of arguing, you respond calmly, "I hear that this feels unbalanced from your side. Let's review the numbers together." By recognizing emotion without surrendering structure, you maintain authority. There is also strength in selective alignment. You do not need to agree with someone's conclusion to acknowledge their experience. You can say, "I understand why that would be frustrating," without conceding your position. To strengthen this skill, practice reflective listening. In your next emotionally charged conversation, summarize the other person's concern in neutral language before offering your view. Notice how this reduces defensiveness. Maintain steady breathing and relaxed posture while they speak. This reinforces containment. Avoid internalizing others' moods. After intense interactions, take a brief moment to reset. Breathe. Recenter your emotional baseline. Do not carry residual emotion into the next conversation. Strategic empathy builds influence because people feel heard. When individuals feel understood, resistance decreases. Dialogue becomes collaborative rather than combative. Authority is not cold detachment. It is composed understanding. You can recognize fear without becoming fearful. You can recognize anger without becoming angry. When others escalate, your calm becomes contrast. Contrast creates credibility. Emotional intelligence at higher levels is not about feeling more. It is about regulating what you feel while accurately perceiving what others experience. Strategic empathy allows you to guide emotional energy instead of being governed by it. Understand deeply. Remain steady. That balance commands respect quietly and consistently. Conflict does not reduce respect. Loss of composure does. Disagreement is inevitable in any environment where ideas, priorities, and personalities intersect. What separates respected individuals from reactive ones is not the absence of conflict, but the way it is handled. Managing conflict with composure requires emotional containment and structured dialogue. Emotional containment is regulating visible reaction under pressure. It ensures that tension does not hijack your tone, posture, or clarity. When challenged, the body reacts instantly. Heart rate rises. Muscles tighten. The urge to defend appears. Without discipline, that reaction shapes your voice and language before you are aware of it. Authority in conflict begins with slowing down. Imagine a senior leader whose proposal is publicly criticized in a meeting. A colleague states bluntly, "This plan ignores key risks." The room becomes still. A reactive response would be defensive, possibly dismissive. The leader might counter sharply, escalating the exchange. Instead, she maintains eye contact, keeps her posture steady, and responds in a calm tone. Let's identify those risks clearly. Which ones concern you most? The phrasing reframes the moment from attack to analysis. She neither retreats nor retaliates. She invites specificity. The critic now must move from accusation to explanation. The dynamic shifts. Composure signals strength. Escalation signals insecurity. Conflict often intensifies because both parties attempt to win rather than clarify. When you focus on understanding the core issue instead of defending ego, tension decreases naturally. Structured dialogue is key. Separate emotion from content. Acknowledge the emotion briefly if necessary, then guide the discussion back to objective points. For example, if someone says, "This approach is a disaster," respond with, "Let's examine what makes it risky in your view." You are not agreeing with the label. You are extracting substance from intensity. Tone discipline is essential. Lowering your volume slightly during heated exchanges forces the other party to adjust downward. Speaking slower reduces collective speed of escalation. Consider a scenario in which two department heads disagree over budget allocation. One raises his voice, insisting his team has been undervalued. The other remains steady, saying, "I understand the concern about resources. Let's look at performance metrics side by side." By refusing to mirror intensity, he anchors the conversation in data. Observers naturally align with the calmer presence. Managing conflict also requires avoiding absolute language. Words like always and never inflame tension. Replace them with specific references. Instead of saying, "You never support this team," say, "In the last two projects, we lacked cross-team coordination." Specificity reduces emotional charge. Another important principle is public versus private correction. If possible, address sensitive disagreements privately. Public escalation often forces both parties to defend image rather than seek resolution. Develop this skill through practice. In your next disagreement, focus on maintaining steady breathing and relaxed shoulders. Notice the impulse to interrupt. Allow the other person to finish fully before responding. Begin your reply with a neutral acknowledgement such as, "I see this differently," rather than immediate contradiction. After the interaction, review your behavior rather than the outcome. Did you maintain tone control? Did you guide the conversation toward clarity? Improvement comes from self-evaluation, not from winning arguments. Respect grows when others see that you can handle opposition without losing balance. It reassures them that you are safe to disagree with. Authority is not demonstrated by overpowering others. It is demonstrated by remaining grounded when others are not. Conflict handled calmly increases credibility. Conflict handled emotionally reduces it. Tension will arise. Let your composure define the atmosphere. In moments of disagreement, your steadiness becomes your influence. Respect requires warmth. It also requires limits. Many people believe they must choose between being liked and being respected. They soften boundaries to avoid discomfort. They tolerate behavior that undermines them. Over time, frustration builds quietly, and authority erodes. Boundaries without aggression is the discipline of communicating limits firmly while preserving dignity. It is strength delivered without hostility. Boundary clarity is clear articulation of limits and expectations. When your boundaries are vague, others test them unintentionally or deliberately. When they are clear and consistent, behavior adjusts naturally. Weak boundaries create resentment. Aggressive boundaries create resistance. Composed assertion creates respect. Composed assertion is firm communication delivered without hostility. It combines steady tone, direct language, and controlled posture. Imagine a team member who repeatedly interrupts you during meetings. At first, you ignore it. Then, irritation builds. Eventually, you snap publicly, "Can you stop cutting me off?" The tone is sharp. The room grows tense. The message may be correct, but the delivery weakens authority. Now consider the same situation approached earlier with composure. After the meeting, you speak privately. "I've noticed I'm often interrupted before I finish my point. I want to ensure ideas are heard fully. Let's allow each other to complete thoughts before jumping in." The message is clear. The tone is calm. The boundary is established without aggression. Timing matters. Address issues early, before frustration compounds. Calm correction carries more weight than delayed outburst. Boundaries also apply to time and access. If colleagues regularly bring non-urgent issues during focused work periods, resentment builds silently. Instead of tolerating the pattern, say, "I'm available for quick updates between 2 and 3. Outside that window, please email and I'll respond later." You protect focus without disrespect. The key is removing emotional charge from the message. State expectations as standards rather than accusations. For example, replace "you're being disrespectful" with "in our meetings, we speak one at a time." Replace "stop bothering me" with "I need uninterrupted time to complete this task." Notice the difference. The first examples personalize conflict. The second clarify behavior. Consider a negotiation where the other party repeatedly pushes for concessions beyond agreed terms. Instead of reacting defensively, you respond evenly. "That adjustment falls outside our agreement. If priorities change, we can revisit structure, but current terms remain as discussed." No anger. No apology. Clear boundary. Consistency reinforces credibility. If you establish a limit but do not enforce it, the boundary dissolves. Calm repetition is powerful. You do not need to escalate volume to reinforce expectation. You need to maintain steadiness. Body language supports clarity. Upright posture. Direct eye contact. Measured speech. Nervous gestures or apologetic tone undermine firm messages. Develop this skill intentionally. Identify one area where you feel mild resentment due to unclear limits. Draft a simple, direct statement clarifying expectation. Rehearse it privately until tone feels steady. Deliver it calmly at the appropriate moment. Afterward, resist the urge to over-explain. Boundaries do not require lengthy justification. Some individuals may test limits initially. Maintain composure and repeat your standard without emotional escalation. Over time, behavior adjusts to consistency. Respect increases when others recognize that you are fair but not easily pressured. They know where you stand. They know what to expect. Boundaries protect both you and the relationship. They prevent unspoken frustration from turning into visible hostility. Strength expressed calmly is difficult to challenge. You do not need aggression to command respect. You need clarity and consistency. Speak directly. Stay composed. Hold your line. That balance signals quiet authority. It is easy to remain composed in private. The real test comes when others are watching. Public challenge, criticism, or scrutiny activates a deeper layer of emotional reaction. Ego becomes involved. Image feels threatened. The impulse to defend intensifies because reputation appears at stake. Public composure is stability under visible scrutiny or challenge. It is the ability to regulate tone, posture, and language when attention is directed at you. When you lose composure in public, the moment expands beyond the issue. Observers stop evaluating the argument and start evaluating you. Imagine presenting an idea in a crowded room when someone interrupts sharply. That doesn't make sense. The words are blunt. Eyes turn toward you. A reactive response might be sarcastic or defensive. You might rush to justify yourself or attempt to discredit the critic. A composed response sounds different. You pause briefly. You keep your posture upright. You respond evenly. Tell me which part you'd like clarified. The room settles. The challenge is redirected into discussion rather than confrontation. By slowing the tempo, you reclaim control. Public pressure often triggers one of two extremes, aggression or withdrawal. Aggression attempts to overpower. Withdrawal attempts to disappear. Neither commands respect. Steady engagement does. Emotional spikes under scrutiny are natural. Heart rate increases. Thoughts accelerate. The key is containment. Containment begins with breathing. A single slow inhale and controlled exhale before responding can stabilize tone significantly. Even a subtle pause signals control. Language must remain precise. Avoid exaggerated defense such as, "That's completely wrong." Instead, use measured phrasing, "I see it differently," or "Let's examine that assumption." The way you handle visible disagreement communicates more than the content of your answer. Consider a senior executive questioned by a journalist about a recent setback. Instead of deflecting or reacting emotionally, she acknowledges the issue directly. The results were below expectation. Here's what we've learned and how we're adjusting. No defensiveness. No evasion. Clarity replaces tension. Observers interpret steadiness as competence. Public composure also requires emotional detachment from approval. When you depend heavily on audience validation, criticism feels destabilizing. When your identity rests on internal standards rather than applause, external pressure loses force. Another important principle is not rushing to fill silence. After a public challenge, silence may feel uncomfortable. Resist the urge to speak immediately to relieve tension. A brief pause demonstrates confidence. Practice strengthens this skill. Simulate pressure environments. Rehearse responses to difficult questions aloud. Train yourself to begin with calm acknowledgement rather than defense. For example, prepare neutral opening lines for criticism. "That's a fair question. I appreciate you raising that. Let's explore it." These phrases buy time and maintain tone. Observe your physical cues during public interaction. If your shoulders rise or your voice tightens, consciously lower both. These small adjustments signal stability. Public composure does not require passivity. You can firmly disagree. You can correct misinformation. The distinction lies in delivery. When you remain measured while others escalate, contrast strengthens your authority. The room subconsciously aligns with steadiness. Respect is amplified in moments of visibility. Observers remember how you handled tension more than what you said during calm periods. Under scrutiny, your internal discipline becomes visible. Stay steady. Slow down. Speak clearly. Public pressure reveals character. Let it reveal strength. Before you speak, you are evaluated. Posture, eye contact, pace of movement, the way you sit, stand, and breathe. All of it communicates emotional state. Words may carry logic, but nonverbal signals carry authority. Nonverbal authority is calm influence projected through posture and tone. It is the alignment of body language with internal stability. When your physical presence reflects composure, respect follows naturally. Many people undermine their own authority unintentionally. They fidget. They avoid eye contact. They speak quickly and fill silence nervously. They shift weight constantly or fold inward physically. These signals suggest uncertainty, even if their ideas are strong. Presence is physical discipline made visible. Imagine entering a boardroom to present an idea. You walk in at a steady pace. You place materials down deliberately. You stand upright with shoulders relaxed. When you begin speaking, your tone is measured, slightly slower than conversational speed. You pause briefly between key points. Your movements are intentional rather than restless. Before your argument is fully heard, the room has already formed an impression: composed, prepared, confident. Contrast this with rushed entry, scattered setup, rapid speech, and constant hand movement. Even strong content loses weight under unstable delivery. Nonverbal authority begins with posture. Stand or sit upright, not rigid but aligned. Keep shoulders relaxed, chin level, feet grounded. This stance signals stability to both you and your audience. Breathing supports tone. Shallow breathing tightens the voice. Slow, controlled breathing deepens it. A steady voice conveys confidence without force. Eye contact must be calm and direct. Not staring aggressively. Not scanning nervously. Hold eye contact long enough to show engagement, then shift naturally. Pacing is equally important. Speaking slightly slower than average creates perception of control. Rushing suggests anxiety. Silence, when used deliberately, amplifies authority. After making a point, allow a brief pause. Let it settle. Consider a leader addressing a tense team after unexpected setbacks. Instead of speaking rapidly to justify decisions, she slows down intentionally. Her tone is even. Her gestures are minimal. The team senses steadiness. Anxiety decreases because leadership appears grounded. Nonverbal signals also matter during listening. Nodding excessively or interrupting with quick affirmations can appear insecure. Instead, maintain stillness and attentive posture. Let others complete thoughts fully before responding. Clothing and environment contribute subtly. Neat, intentional presentation reinforces internal order. Disorganization distracts from message. To develop this skill, practice recording yourself during mock presentations or important conversations. Observe posture, pace, and gestures objectively. Notice any repetitive movements or vocal fillers. Adjust gradually. Another exercise is deliberate slowing. In your next significant interaction, reduce speaking speed by 10%. Insert 1-second pauses after key statements. Notice how the room responds. Authority rarely needs volume. It needs stability. When body and voice align with emotional control, your presence becomes persuasive before logic enters the discussion. Nonverbal authority also protects you during challenge. If criticized, maintain posture and tone. Do not shrink physically. Do not tense visibly. Hold steady. That steadiness communicates resilience. Over time, consistency in nonverbal signals builds reputation. People describe you as calm, confident, grounded. This perception amplifies influence. Emotional intelligence is not only internal regulation. It is visible alignment. Stand steady. Move deliberately. Speak with control. Before your message is analyzed, your presence is judged. Let that presence reflect strength. Respect is built in patterns. One calm response impresses. Consistent calm responses establish credibility. People watch for reliability in your emotional behavior. They ask silently, is this person steady or unpredictable? Emotional consistency is predictable, stable reactions across situations. It does not mean emotional numbness. It means your tone, intensity, and decision-making remain proportionate regardless of circumstance. Trust through emotional consistency develops when others experience you as steady over time. When your mood swings sharply based on minor events, people adapt cautiously. When your demeanor remains balanced across pressure and praise, confidence in you deepens. Consider a department head who delivers strong results but reacts visibly to small setbacks. On good days, he is energized and engaging. On difficult days, he is distant or irritable. His team never knows which version will show up. Productivity may remain intact, but trust weakens. Now imagine a leader whose tone remains measured regardless of performance cycles. When results exceed expectations, she acknowledges success without exaggeration. When challenges arise, she addresses them directly without emotional volatility. Over months, her team begins to feel secure. They focus more on work and less on anticipating mood shifts. Emotional consistency reduces anxiety in others. It also strengthens your influence in high-stakes environments. If people believe you will respond rationally rather than emotionally, they are more willing to share concerns, admit mistakes, and engage in honest dialogue. Consistency requires awareness of subtle mood fluctuations. Fatigue, stress, and external pressures influence behavior. Without conscious regulation, these factors leak into tone and body language. Imagine a professional who receives difficult personal news during the week. He still must lead meetings and make decisions. Emotional consistency does not demand denial of personal experience. It requires measured expression. He may acknowledge distraction briefly if necessary, but he maintains steady tone and fair judgment in professional settings. This stability reinforces credibility. Another common threat to consistency is praise. Success can produce exaggerated enthusiasm that later contrasts sharply with disappointment during setbacks. Keeping emotional amplitude within reasonable range preserves steadiness. This does not mean suppressing celebration. It means expressing it proportionately. Developing emotional consistency requires daily reflection. At the end of each day, review your interactions. Were there moments where your tone shifted sharply? Did stress influence your patience? Identify patterns early. A useful exercise is selecting 3 core behavioral standards you commit to maintaining in every environment. For example, measured tone, respectful language, and attentive listening. Evaluate yourself against these standards weekly. Improvement lies in repetition. Consistency also builds personal confidence. When you know your reactions are stable, you trust yourself under pressure. That internal trust reduces hesitation and overcompensation. Others interpret emotional steadiness as maturity. They associate it with leadership potential. Even without formal authority, consistent composure elevates your standing in any group. There is power in being predictable in the right way. predictable calm, predictable fairness, predictable clarity. Emotional consistency does not eliminate disagreement or intensity. It ensures that intensity remains controlled and appropriate. Over time, patterns form reputation. Reputation shapes influence. When people know that you will remain balanced in both challenge and success, they rely on you more readily. Trust is rarely built through dramatic gestures. It is built through steady presence repeated daily. Let your emotional behavior be consistent enough that others relax in your presence. Reliability commands respect quietly and enduringly. Not every room speaks the same language. Some environments reward directness. Others respond to nuance. Some personalities prefer brevity. Others need context. Emotional intelligence at a higher level requires flexibility without losing authenticity. Adaptive framing is adjusting communication style to fit context while preserving core values. It allows you to connect across differences without compromising who you are. Many people mistake consistency for rigidity. They use the same tone, pace, and structure regardless of audience. When the message fails to land, they repeat it louder instead of differently. Adaptive social intelligence begins with observation. Notice how others communicate. Do they speak quickly or slowly? Do they prioritize data or relationships? Are they concise or expansive? Imagine presenting a proposal to two different stakeholders. One is analytical, focused on metrics and risk assessment. The other is relational, focused on team impact and long-term vision. Delivering the same presentation in the same format to both reduces effectiveness. With adaptive framing, you adjust emphasis. To the analytical stakeholder, you lead with numbers, projections, and structured reasoning. To the relational stakeholder, you highlight team alignment, morale, and strategic positioning. The core message remains intact. The framing shifts. This is not manipulation. It is translation. Consider a manager working with two team members. One prefers direct feedback and clear correction. The other responds better to encouragement and collaborative problem-solving. Treating both identically may appear fair, but it may not be effective. Adaptive communication respects individual differences while maintaining consistent standards. The key is internal stability. If adaptation requires abandoning your values or suppressing authenticity, it becomes performance rather than intelligence. True adaptability aligns delivery, not principles. Another scenario illustrates this balance. In a fast-paced startup environment, concise and energetic communication may be valued. In a formal board setting, slower pacing and structured language may carry more authority. Adjusting tempo and vocabulary signals awareness of context. Adaptive framing also applies during conflict. With a highly emotional individual, you may need to slow the conversation and acknowledge feelings more explicitly. With a highly logical counterpart, focus on evidence and outcomes. To develop this skill, practice situational awareness. Before entering a conversation, ask yourself, what does this environment value? Speed or deliberation? Detail or summary? Formality or openness? During the interaction, observe feedback signals. If attention fades, adjust pace. If confusion appears, clarify structure. Flexibility increases influence. Imagine a leader addressing a multicultural team. Communication styles vary widely. By observing reactions carefully, she adjusts examples, tone, and pacing to ensure clarity across backgrounds. Her authority strengthens because she demonstrates awareness rather than assumption. Adaptive social intelligence does not dilute your identity. It enhances your reach. Rigid communication often signals insecurity. Flexible communication signals confidence. An effective exercise is recording how you communicate in different settings. Notice whether your tone shifts naturally or remains static. Experiment with slight adjustments in pace and structure, then observe results. Adaptation requires emotional control. Without stability, changes in environment may destabilize you. With stability, you adjust deliberately rather than reactively. Respect grows when others feel understood within their own framework. You do not need to change who you are. You need to present your message in ways others can receive. Influence expands when flexibility meets consistency of values. Observe. Adjust. Remain grounded. That combination commands respect across any room. Composure is not tested once. It is tested repeatedly. Stress cycles return in different forms. Career transitions, family changes, financial pressure, public scrutiny, unexpected setbacks. Emotional intelligence that functions only in calm periods is incomplete. Long-term respect requires endurance. Emotional endurance is sustained regulation over extended periods of stress. It is the ability to maintain clarity and composure not just for minutes, but for months when circumstances are demanding. Short bursts of control are common. Anyone can remain steady during a single meeting. The challenge is maintaining that steadiness during ongoing uncertainty. Consider a leader navigating organizational restructuring. Roles shift. Uncertainty spreads. Team morale fluctuates. Questions arise daily. For weeks, the leader must answer similar concerns repeatedly. Fatigue builds. Irritation tempts expression. If composure fractures gradually, confidence in leadership weakens. If steadiness remains consistent, trust deepens despite instability. Emotional endurance begins with awareness of depletion. Fatigue reduces patience. Stress narrows perception. Without deliberate recovery, regulation deteriorates. Long-term discipline requires rhythm. Periods of intense engagement must be balanced with intentional restoration. Stepping away briefly from high-pressure environments prevents accumulation of emotional residue. Imagine a professional handling ongoing negotiations with multiple stakeholders. Conversations are tense. Decisions carry weight. Instead of carrying emotional strain from one interaction into the next, she creates short resets between meetings. A brief walk. Controlled breathing. Silence without digital input. These small resets preserve baseline stability across the day. Endurance also requires reframing adversity. Instead of seeing prolonged stress as threat, interpret it as training. Each difficult interaction strengthens regulation capacity. Another key factor is boundary protection. During long stress cycles, people often overextend themselves in an attempt to control outcomes. Exhaustion follows. Establishing limits on availability and preserving personal recovery time supports emotional sustainability. Consistency during extended challenge commands deeper respect than composure during isolated events. There is also value in long-term perspective. Temporary turbulence often appears overwhelming in the moment. Viewing circumstances within broader timelines reduces emotional intensity. A practical exercise supports endurance. At the start of each week, identify one predictable stressor you will face. Plan in advance how you will regulate during it. Define one reset ritual you will use afterward. This proactive approach reduces emotional drain. Physical habits influence endurance significantly. Regular sleep, movement, and structured routines stabilize mood and resilience. Neglecting them erodes capacity quietly. Emotional endurance does not mean suppressing emotion for extended periods. It means processing emotion constructively rather than allowing it to leak into behavior unpredictably. Consider someone navigating a prolonged conflict at work. Instead of venting publicly or internalizing frustration silently, he schedules private reflection time, writes thoughts clearly, and approaches discussions prepared rather than reactive. Over months, his reputation for steadiness strengthens even amid difficulty. People remember who remained composed when tension persisted. Authority solidifies when others witness stability across changing conditions. Endurance transforms emotional intelligence from skill into character. When cycles repeat and you remain measured, confidence in your leadership grows. Stress will return in new forms. Prepare not just for moments, but for seasons. Sustain your regulation. Protect your energy. Maintain your standards. Long-term composure is rare, and rarity commands respect. At some point, emotional intelligence stops being something you practice. It becomes who you are. Techniques help. Pausing before responding. Managing tone. Reading social signals. Setting boundaries. Adapting communication. Sustaining composure. These are skills. But skills alone do not command lasting respect. Identity does. Respected identity is a self-concept grounded in calm strength and disciplined response. It is the internal standard that governs behavior regardless of environment, status, or pressure. When emotional intelligence is tied only to strategy, it is used selectively. You regulate yourself when it benefits you. You stay composed when others are watching. Under fatigue or frustration, discipline slips. When it becomes identity, composure is not situational. It is consistent. Imagine a professional who once struggled with visible irritation during disagreement. Over time, he practiced the response gap, perception discipline, and composed assertion. Gradually, his internal dialogue shifted. Instead of thinking, "I need to stay calm," he began thinking, "I am someone who responds deliberately." The difference is subtle. The impact is significant. Months later, in a high-stakes negotiation, he is confronted unexpectedly. The old surge of irritation appears briefly. But because his identity now includes steadiness, his reaction follows that standard automatically. He pauses. He clarifies. He maintains tone. Others in the room sense control. Authority remains intact. Identity eliminates internal debate. If you see yourself as someone who holds clear boundaries, you do not struggle to enforce them. If you see yourself as someone who maintains emotional consistency, you do not fluctuate wildly with praise or criticism. If you see yourself as someone who practices strategic empathy, you do not absorb emotional chaos around you. Your behavior aligns with who you believe you are. Building this identity requires repetition under pressure. Each time you regulate instead of react, you reinforce it. Each time you maintain posture and tone during challenge, you strengthen it. Each time you choose clarity over ego, you confirm it. Language reinforces identity. Replace "I'm trying to be more composed" with "I respond with composure." Replace "I need to work on my reactions" with "I choose deliberate responses." Words shape expectation. Expectation shapes behavior. Environment matters as well. Surround yourself with individuals who value maturity and discipline. Limit exposure to chronic emotional volatility. Identity stabilizes when reinforced consistently. Respected identity also includes humility. Emotional intelligence does not eliminate mistakes. You may still react poorly at times. The distinction lies in correction. A respected individual acknowledges missteps quickly and adjusts without defensiveness. Accountability strengthens credibility. Over time, your reputation forms around patterns. People describe you as steady, fair, measured, difficult to provoke, easy to trust. These descriptions become social evidence of your identity. Authority then becomes natural rather than forced. You no longer need to assert dominance. Your presence communicates stability. Your tone communicates clarity. Your reactions communicate control. In any room, people assess safety and strength instinctively. When they sense that you regulate yourself consistently, they relax. When they relax, influence expands. Emotional intelligence at its highest level is integration. Calm under pressure. Clear in disagreement. Firm in boundaries. Flexible in communication. Consistent across seasons. When these qualities become standard rather than effort, respect follows without demand. You are no longer attempting to command the room. Your presence does it for you. This is the culmination of emotional discipline, a stable identity that carries authority quietly, steadily, and without force. Become the person whose composure is predictable, whose reactions are measured, and whose strength is calm. That identity commands respect in any room.